The Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, known as SNAP, is undergoing changes at the federal and state level. On today's Speaking Of, we look at the impact of SNAP in Florida and what to expect from the changes. Gina Jordan talks with Monique Ellsworth from Second Harvest of the Big Bend and Sky Beard from No Kid Hungry, Florida.
SNAP is the country's largest federal food assistance program. SNAP stands for Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program. And you may have previously heard these income-based benefits referred to as food stamps. SNAP provides monthly funds to families and individuals that can be used at authorized grocery retailers. Now, Florida has a population over 22 million. And more than 10% of those residents receive SNAP benefits. But things are changing. Starting April 20th, Florida will restrict what SNAP benefits can be used to purchase in an effort to cut unhealthy intake and bolster nutrition. Florida lawmakers are also considering legislation that would raise the age of work requirements to 64 and require a photo ID on what's known as EBT cards to get the benefits. Pensacola Republican Senator Don Gates says this action is necessary after the federal Big Beautiful Bill changed the programs to penalize states with high error rates.
There is a reason why our error rate in EBT cards is almost 3 times the federal requirement. We have a 15% error rate. That's huge. That's huge. We've got to do something about it. Not only because we want to avoid a federal penalty, but because it is absolutely terrible economic stewardship.
To explain the error rate and more, Sky Beard is with me. Howdy, Sky.
Good morning.
Hey, thanks for coming in. Let's tell people that you're the Florida director for No Kid Hungry. That's a national campaign run by the nonprofit Share Our Strength. Did I get that right?
You got that right.
Great. Okay. Let's talk about changes that are coming to SNAP. First of all, what are you expecting for Florida based on state-level changes that are in the works?
Yeah, a lot of conversation across the state right now happening about SNAP. And I think it's important to remember how critical the program is to addressing food insecurity across the state. We've got about 3 million participants on SNAP, and it's bringing in about $6.5 billion in federal funds that are spent in local retailers and grocers. So it's a large program. It deserves a great conversation that it's having right now. And we'll see where some state level legislation ends as we kind of approach the finish line any day now.
So I know that they're talking about potentially changing the work requirements, so upping the age, like up to 64 to get benefits. Also, they're talking about the type of products that can be purchased with SNAP benefits. What are your thoughts about those?
Yeah, the purchasing guidelines are part of a waiver that Florida and approximately 25 or so other states have submitted to USDA, and that is changing and limiting what folks can purchase on SNAP with the intent of making sure that those funds are used to purchase as healthy foods as possible. So we will have limits in April for things like sodas and prepared desserts and other things that folks won't be able to purchase. So it's understandable, this attention on making sure that people have access to healthy foods. There's some practical and logistical challenges that come with implementing such restrictions. And we just want to make sure that families that are receiving SNAP are able to do so with dignity and the respect that they deserve, just as all shoppers deserve. And there are, as you mentioned, lots of conversations about work requirements and changes to some waivers that were previously available for certain folks that were on SNAP. And the Department of Children and Families is currently implementing those as those changes were required at the federal level as part of H.R. 1 or the Federal Reconciliation Bill back in July.
The big, beautiful bill.
That is correct.
Yeah. So that's a lot of people on SNAP benefits in Florida. What can you tell us about the impact of this program on Florida's economy?
Yeah, it is a large economic driver, not only addressing the important issue of food insecurity and making sure that kids and families and veterans and seniors have access to the food that they need to be healthy and support their families. But as you mentioned, it is a huge economic driver with over $6 billion in benefits flowing through the state's economy. It supports many retailers, particularly in rural communities. There aren't many food retailers in some areas of our state. And those that often are the sole or one of the few retailers, much of their revenue comes from the purchases made on EBT or SNAP cards. So it really does fuel many local businesses, many independent businesses, and that's a lot of dollars flowing through Florida's economy, again, spent at grocers, farmers markets, other places that accept EBT cards.
And making a big difference in rural areas, it sounds like.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Let's address the Big Beautiful Bill's impact on costs to Florida for SNAP. So we're going to be spending more. Is that correct?
That's correct. There was a really some historic changes made in the federal bill last July. It's interesting now that those happened back in July, but I think a lot of states are really just understanding or coming to realize what was included in that federal legislation and the impact that it will have on the state's economy. And that's true for SNAP. There were a couple changes made. One of them is related to the administrative cost to operate the SNAP program. It is very common in all federal programs that the state contributes a portion of that, and then the federal government pays some too. Usually that's a 50-50 cost share. In the federal bill, that cost is shifting, with more funding coming from states at 75% and 25% spent by the federal government. So for Florida, we're looking at an additional about $50.6 million that the state's going to have to find just to support the operation of SNAP. This is kind of the people that do that great work. The infrastructure, the technology at the Department of Children and Families is going to cost more for all states.
Yeah, that's no small amount.
Correct.
We heard Senator Gates talk about the state's error rate. Can you tell us what he means by that?
A lot of interest in error rates now, and that's because they are being talked about in ways that previously they weren't used. I think it's important to know that state agencies and USDA at the federal level have had a process for talking about and calculating error rates for a long time, and they were always a quality assurance measure for the state agency to use to determine where they could improve and where things are going well. What changed in H.R. 1 is that error rates now are used as a way to determine how much a state will have to pay for the cost of the actual benefit. That has always and forever been 100% paid by the federal government. I think of it as if my family were to receive SNAP benefits and I go and I swipe my card at my local grocer, that swipe, the amount of the groceries, has always been federally funded, and that is changing, and that's significant. And that is all based on error rates. So the simplest way to think of an error rate is the accuracy of a state in determining SNAP benefits for families over a given period of time. It's important to remember that error rates aren't the same thing as a fraud rate, and it can also be an over or under payment issue. So if my family were to receive $100 and it was determined I should have gotten $125 or I shouldn't have gotten maybe $85 a month, those are both considered in the error rates.
And just curious, do people accidentally get too much money and then they have to give it back?
That does happen. And that speaks to kind of the complexity that the Department of Children and Families manages when determining eligibility. There's a lot of rules and regulations around SNAP, and things do happen, and there are errors made and ways to correct those.
Yeah. It sounds like no matter what happens, Florida will have to pay more for SNAP.
That is true, and that's true in the administrative cost increase and also in this benefits amount that states before never had to pay. The error rates are really the key to really looking at what Florida will have to pay. We don't know yet what the next error rates will be. We will know those in June. So we only know estimations looking at historical information about error rates. And as you heard Senator Gates say, Florida's is a little high at this moment. Mm-hmm. And being at a little over 15%, if that were to remain constant, Florida will be expected to pay about $1 billion a year in order to maintain SNAP benefits as they are currently in the state.
So the question is, how in the world do we pay for that and keep providing assistance?
Well, it's very clear that the Department of Children and Families is very aware and very invested in finding ways to get that error rate down. In order for states not to have to pay, we have to get that number down below 6%. And they are working all day, every day.
Yeah.
To make sure that they are doing all that they can to make that happen. It is important that the state provide the support that the department needs in order to be successful in whatever way they can be to do that. But it is a delicate balance because we know that SNAP is one of the best tools we have in the toolbox for fighting food insecurity.
Yeah.
And we want to make sure that the families who are eligible for SNAP continue to receive it. Also, at the same time, now we're having to grapple with a scenario where maybe we have to find $1 billion a year.
Yeah. What about kids on SNAP? School lunches, for example. How might a big change in SNAP impact school lunches?
Yeah, it's a really good question because I think we think of changes to SNAP in a real way that is related to just the SNAP benefits, but it surely is more than that. In Florida, we have what's called a direct certification process, which is lovely for families who are managing the process of these benefit programs. And so if a family is eligible for SNAP, if they have school-age children, those children are automatically eligible for free or reduced meals at school, which makes that process a whole lot easier and provides access to food in schools as well. Mm-hmm. So we do worry that if there are declines in SNAP, then it also could impact access to school meals as well. And that would be incredibly difficult for families if they are challenged with food at home and also at school.
Yeah, especially thinking about that in terms of summer coming when kids aren't in school.
Absolutely. Summer is a real challenging time as well.
Yeah. Well, I know you've been busy trying to get the attention of some lawmakers, I'm sure. What is the most urgent detail about SNAP changes that you think we should know?
I think it's really important that we all, including policymakers in Tallahassee and folks who are all across this state, really understand the value and the importance of the SNAP program. As I mentioned, we got about 3 million people who are participating, and those are people who are working so incredibly hard to put food on the table. I think it's important that we recognize who receives SNAP and really not fall into maybe some of the thoughts that come up sometimes when we think of people who receive these benefit programs. These are hardworking families with children who are doing everything they can to put food on the table. It's elderly folks, it's veterans, it's people who really just need some support and make sure they have access to high quality nutrition. And so really thinking about who receives these benefits, the value of it, how important it is in our fight for food insecurity, and making sure we keep that in the forefront as we have continued difficult conversations.
Well, I know you're going to stay busy. Sky Beard, Florida Director for No Kid Hungry, thank you for the work you do.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
I'm joined now by Second Harvest of the Big Bend CEO Monique Ellsworth. Welcome.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
We appreciate you being here. So we're talking about reduced federal funding. What operational challenges do you foresee for Second Harvest with that?
Second Harvest of the Big Bend is roughly responding to the food insecurity of about 100,000 individuals in our service area. So with the reduction of SNAP benefits, an untold amount of additional food will be necessary to kind of meet that loss.
Yeah, so this could impact the amount you have to come up with and the variety, right?
Yeah, both. And, we got a little bit of a taste of what this felt like during the government shutdown. So back in November, SNAP benefits were put on pause. And of course, as a food bank, we were really struggling with how do we make up the difference. And Feeding America, who is the national organization that we benefit from being a member of, helped us conceptualize the loss of SNAP benefits so that we could understand what it felt like and then put that to numbers. So SNAP benefits, for every one meal a food bank offers, SNAP is offering 9.
Oh, my goodness.
So when SNAP benefits went away, there was no way that the food bank network or charitable food programs were going to be able to have a 9x growth immediately to meet that need. So as the federal benefits change and what our local families are offered through benefit programs change, food banks and charitable food programs will likely struggle, if ever, being able to make up for the difference in that kind of support that families receive.
So I was going to ask you if Second Harvest was ready to handle the influx, but I think you just told me it's going to be difficult.
It's going to be difficult. I mean, today we currently struggle with meeting the demand that our neighbors have right now. And that is without the, added responsibility that will occur when the SNAP benefit requirements change, when more people are not offered SNAP benefits. If we have a hurricane this summer, you know what I mean? Like any natural disaster, any man-made disaster, we are constantly having to bend and twist with the needs of our community.
Yeah. So we know that some items are going to be restricted next month, like candy and colas and energy drinks. Do you think clients will shift their purchasing habits toward healthier options?
Anecdotally, what I can say about that from families that we're talking to, and actually just any shopper who has their eyes open walking around, higher processed foods, these are the cheaper items. To purchase nutritious food or organic food, that is a luxury item in your shopping cart. My hope would always be that if that shift was being enacted at a federal level, that there would also be an opportunity to do more education on nutrition. If we're going to shift that in a more nutritious direction, my hope is that the food bank, that Second Harvest, will be able to accompany that with doing some nutrition education.
And you mentioned that SNAP education like this was defunded. People were having the opportunity to be educated about it, but the big, beautiful bill took that away.
Yeah, so for the last few years, we've been in a great position as a food bank and the Food Bank Network of Florida. In partnership with IFAS, we supported the SNAP education and nutrition education in all 67 counties of Florida. So there was a huge network of us that were going out and doing cooking demonstrations, nutrition education classes, and that was all supported by SNAP education funding. And yes, that funding was removed entirely. And so our state is currently winding down the support that was once provided through that.
We do have some community help. We have some micro pantries around. We have church outreaches. What else can you tell us to do? What else can we do to help you guys?
So the food bank rides on the back of our community. We do for our community what we get from our community. And so we ask people, if you have the time, come out and volunteer with us. That could be coming out to our distribution center, the food bank, and actually be in there and help us sort the food, help us box up the food, learn about our mission. Follow us on social media so that you can share information about the work that we're doing. We only have the reach that our current network through social media has. Every person that makes a post helps us reach more families that might be in need. So be an ambassador, share our information on social media. And the third thing is that cash is king. If you have the ability to make a contribution to Second Harvest, our purchasing capacity is huge. So for every dollar donated, it's the equivalent of 4 meals.
Wow.
Four meals, yeah. So if making contributions, that would be really helpful. And also, I will say that our staff felt the loss of SNAP education so greatly, and our board was so concerned about the fact that this wasn't going to be something that was funded, that we have been working really hard to weave nutrition education into just the fabric of how we operate. So we've worked with Blue Cross Foundation to ensure that our nutrition education is something that we're still doing out in the community. So, watch us evolve. We're going to do that for a community. We have in the past and we will in the future.
And you guys are now covering 16 counties?
16 counties, yes, ma'am.
Yeah. A lot of rural areas in those counties.
Incredibly rural, yes.
We've got these stricter work requirements for most able-bodied adults who apply for SNAP benefits. Do you think that will impact somehow food insecurity levels in particularly those rural areas?
I'll be curious to see what opportunities the applicants that live in those areas have to meet new work requirements and application requirements. All we can do as a food bank is stand ready and work to serve them.
Yeah. Given the agricultural base of much of the Big Bend region, what kind of opportunities do you see to strengthen partnerships with local farmers or grocers?
So, excellent question. You asked about the 16 counties. So that actually just changed in 2023, in April of 2023. Feeding America asked us to take on 5 additional counties. And so those were Dixie, Lafayette, Columbia counties, Hamilton, kind of our far east portion of our service area. And we were curious about opportunities with large grocers over there who we might be able to onboard as new donors. And in those 5 counties, there were 2 Walmarts and 1 Publix. So some of those counties don't even have a large grocer like a Walmart or a Publix. But what we were able to find is that in those 5 counties, that was kind of the Swanee Valley, some of the most soil nutritious counties in our state and really high producers of produce. So we identified 67 farmers that we were able to begin exploring partnerships with and using contracts, grants, and our own strategies to infuse those communities with purchases to those local growers and farmers, purchasing local and feeding local using the farms that already exist there. And we hope that we're able to push funds that we are earning back into the local economy and supporting the small agribusiness that is really rich in North Florida.
So you would take some grant money, for example, and go to one of those farms. Tell us what that looks like. Do you say, can you please produce food for the food bank?
Luckily for us, our Feeding Florida is our statewide association, and they've been working really hard to unify our voice and go to the state for appropriations requests. And we have a really amazing program called Farmers Feeding Florida. And the entire purpose of that is to get state allocated funding so that we can go in and invite farmers to participate in the work that we do to feed their neighbors oftentimes. And what that looks like is that farmers might have plowed the land, enriched the soils, planted everything, the irrigation system set up, they grow everything, and now they've done their first gleaning or they've pulled from their crops they can for like Class A type product. So the stuff that we are accustomed to seeing in Walmart or Publix. Now we have what's left on the field or in the trees could be like the misfits, the smaller, the odd shapes. And when we talk to those local farmers and growers, they're like, this is still perfectly nutritious food. It just doesn't necessarily match the expectations of the retailer. Mm-hmm. And so oftentimes what those farmers will say is that, we're in this for business. We want to make money. However, I hate the idea that I'm looking in my field and I'm seeing perfectly good food rot. And my child is enrolled in the school and I attend this service committee or club. I go to this church and I know that my neighbors are in need. So what they offer us, the food banks, is saying we will donate the cost up until the point that the crops are ready if the food bank network will pay the packaging up and transportation of. So we get it at a discounted rate. Mm-hmm. Once we have so-called like greased the wheels with so many of these farmers while we're kind of like paying for them to help us secure more local fresh food, they'll actually come back to us and say, hey, listen, we actually have an abundance. Can we go ahead and donate that to you? So there's a really beautiful combination of us paying for the produce and then them donating lots of stuff back to us.
That's amazing. And it also gives it an air of, this is official. Like, I don't know if that farmer would be allowed to donate food to that school without going through you guys, right?
Well, it certainly helps to make sure that we are in a position where the farmer knows that we're valuing what they do. We value this family group that's farming locally, or we value this small or large business that is doing local growing work. So we just like being able to show up at the table with funds to participate.
Yeah, that's great. What unintended consequences concern you if we're talking about these new restrictions to SNAP, a loss of some federal funding? Do you see some unintended consequences happening, potentially?
Well, I think that when people don't have consistent access to food, their health declines. So if we're looking at trying to ensure that Floridians are healthy, food is central to that. That is the foundation of health. And so my concern is that survival eating will be something that people do, which is going to be taking what meager dollars they have and purchasing what they can afford, which might be back to less nutritious food. I also think that we're going to receive more of those phone calls, and 211 will receive more of those phone calls where we're hearing that grandparents are skipping meals, parents skipping meals so that their children can eat, people going without so that the children aren't. I worry about this, going into effect as we roll into the summer months, and we're going to see so many children that are traditionally supported by free and reduced school lunches not having access to that simply because of the season that they're in, like it's summer and the schools aren't doing that, and the added impact of those parents now not having the same amount of, if at all, those benefits to support the children during the summer months.
Yeah, I know summer's a problem. And you also just alluded to this, but food deserts, we hear that term all the time. What are you guys doing in regards to areas that would be considered food deserts? What kind of system is in place to help those folks?
So the way that the food bank gets the food out is that we have about 125 partner agencies. So that could be schools, churches, senior centers, community centers, other nonprofits, and they will set up usually pantries that are accessible by that community. For example, I might not be like the best to tell you what Gulf County needs, but we go to Gulf County and we find out who's already doing work to serve, and we simply like bolster the work to serve and feed people in Gulf County. Now, Gulf County, the number of partner agencies we have in that county might be pretty sparse because it might be that we can't drum up enough interest or consistent support to be able to have a really robust network in Gulf County. So what we will do, the food bank will actually go in and do food distributions ourselves. So we could see that there's, a number of cities within Gulf County where there are food pantries, but we know that there's other areas of that community that need support. So we go in, we bring our trucks, and we do direct distributions to the neighbor.
Yeah. How often do you guys do these food distributions? Do you have a set amount that you try to do in various counties?
So being a part of Feeding America, they actually were contractually bound to a number of pounds that have to be distributed in each of the counties, and like the types of food. They want to see that we're giving out nutritious food. So every month we're reporting back to Feeding America how much food went into each of our 16 counties and the types of food, those categories.
Well, thank goodness you do. It sounds stressful.
No, I mean, that's what we're built to do is response. We're just like, we have a team that's ready to hit the ground running. We have volunteers on call to meet us out at locations and help us with our distributions. We have incredible donors that we're able to reach out to and say, this is what we're facing right now. Is there anything you can do to help us meet this need? So this is what we're here for.
Second Harvest of the Big Bend CEO Monique Ellsworth. Thank you.
Thank you.